In this video, I'm gonna go over 5 things no one tells you about fry screaming. And I'm gonna start from number 5 and work my way up all the way down to the most important one at number 1. Okay, so my name is David and I struggled learning to fry scream for over 5 years. But after I finally figured it out, I've taught over 2,200 students how to scream, including Nick Nocturnal. So let's get into number 5. So what a lot of people don't tell you about fry screaming is that fry screaming actually feels different in the morning versus the evening. So let me tell you why. So when we are sleeping, and assuming that you're sleeping laying down, then what happens is that our fluids pool up, and then gravity makes it so that our blood vessels and our capillaries and our vocal cords get filled up with more fluid and blood. And then when we wake up, our vocal cords are actually thicker. They are thicker together. And so in the mornings, that changes, that difference in shape changes how we compress. Because in order to do a fry scream, what we need to do is we got to bring our vocal cords together and we got to make them sputter like this. In the mornings, if they're a certain size, then it will feel different. And so what happens is that as the day goes on and we're standing upright, gravity pulls down the blood, the fluids. And as a result, our capillaries, our blood vessels, our vocal cords, they start to thin out and they start to become thinner. And so as a result, there's more distance in between them. So it typically requires more compression in order to get them to sputter correctly. And so that's, once you know that, that's very different than where most people's brain goes. Most people's brain, their brain tells them like, oh, like I practiced screaming in the morning and, it felt one way, but then as the day went on, then it felt a different way. I must be hurting my voice. I must be wearing my voice out. But rest assured, it has nothing to do with wearing out your voice. It's purely just because, you woke up and your vocal cords are a different shape. And as you go on through the day, then they actually change shape. So, okay. So the next thing that no one tells you about fry screaming is that many people think and say that fry screams are effortless. But what they don't tell you is that there's 2 huge nuances to this. So the first thing that most people don't tell you and that they don't know is that there's different types of fry screams. For example, oh and ow. And the thing is, some of these fry screams take more force than others. So if you are learning fry screams from somebody who is doing, let's say, a head voice fry scream, for them, fry screams will feel more effortless compared to if you are trying to learn from someone who is trying to teach you lower place chest fries. Oh, that person will have a different experience because that actually takes more effort. So yeah, different screams require different levels of force and effort. So the second nuance is that when you get started, if you aim for effortless screams, then you're at risk of not finding the scream to begin with or not finding it consistently enough. And let me explain. So learning to fry scream is kind of like you're learning to bounce on a tightrope, where you are, at first when you're bouncing on a tightrope, you're first going to be like, and it takes a lot of muscle to really sort of maintain that balance, but you can do it. And then over time, what happens is that then it'll require less intense muscle movements and you'll be like, okay. And then you'll get the swing of it and then you'll be able to maintain that balance with just a bunch of simple, light micro adjustments. And so learning to scream is a lot like that, where yes, you will get to a point where it feels effortless, but if you try and skip the effort stage where you're really trying hard to put it all together, then it's going to be very difficult for you to get to the point where it feels effortless. Okay, so the next thing, many people feel like they are doing incorrect fry screaming techniques. But what they don't tell you, what people don't tell you, is that oftentimes you can be doing a sound that is actually correct, but the thing is you just don't like that tone, and you can change it to be something that you do like. There's a big difference between incorrect technique and a tone you don't like. So I see this a lot specifically with people learning head fries, where oftentimes I'll teach people to do a head fry scream, and maybe they will sound like this. And I personally like that, being that, I think that that's a pretty cool deathcore sound, but oftentimes people don't like that sound, and then they think that they're just screaming wrong, when in reality, what they want to hear is they want to hear that same technique, except for at a lower larynx position. So, and that's what they want to hear. So that's why it's important to know what you're doing. That's why it's important to know when you're doing a correct technique. So here's how you tell. So you are probably doing a correct fry screaming technique if it feels comfortable. It also, it sounds wet, staticky, gurgly, and smooth. And third, if you're going for a pitchless scream, you want to make sure that there's no voice in it. There's no, or there's no, it's just white noise. So if you are doing all three of those things, then your tone is probably correct. Oh yeah, and a fourth thing is you want to make sure that it's not whispery too. You want to make sure it's full. So if you're doing all four of those things, then you're probably doing correct technique. And then to shape it to a tone that you do like, then you can mess around with mouth shapes, tongue shapes, the position of your larynx, until you find a version of your fry scream that you like. Okay, so the next thing that nobody tells you about fry screams is that you need to focus on your progress instead of being fixated on your problems. So what'll happen with a lot of students is that I'm taking them through their screams and they're practicing, and let's say that they're screaming a phrase. So a lot of people, let's say if they did 90% of that wrong, but that last 10% they did it correctly, a lot of people will fixate on that 90%. And the reason why that's a problem is that they tend to beat themselves up. And that tends to discourage them from continuing. And they're like, man, I suck. But what you should be doing is that you should be focusing on that 10% when you are doing it right. And you should be encouraged by that. Because when you do that, then you'll be like, oh, cool, I'm actually doing it right here. This is amazing. And then the thing is, the strategy is we want to grow your screaming technique from what you're doing it right, from what you're doing right, as opposed to starting from what you're doing wrong and try to fix it somehow. That's a lot harder of a game to play than starting from what you're doing right and like growing it from there. So for example, let's say that you get it with like, let's say you get your fry scream with an O vowel. Oh, you can start with what's working and then slowly morph it into other vowels. Oh, as opposed to, let's say an E vowel doesn't work for you, and you're trying to fix the E vowel, and then you're like, what am I doing? A lot harder to do that. Okay, so now let's talk about the most important thing that nobody tells you about fry screaming, or most people don't tell you about fry screaming. So the thing is, let me kind of set the scene. So back when I was learning to scream, I went to many different coaches. I watched every tutorial under the sun, and everybody that I was learning from had their secret method learning to fry scream, where they'd be like, oh, this is the best method to do it. You got to just do vocal fry and push that out. Or somebody else was like, oh, no, this is the best method. You got to do a door creaking sound. And you got to push that out. And everybody had their own secret method that they swore was the best thing. But here's the thing. Everybody's voice is different. There is no one size fits all approach for everybody. There is no one method that just magically works for 100% of people. And I say that having taught over 2,000 people. Man, if there was a secret method that worked for everybody, my job would be so much easier, but it's not. And little things can influence people's voice and how they treat it. And for example, I've seen people with different accents. I've seen their accent affect how they use their voice. I've seen people that have rehabilitated their voice from injury. And so as a result, they're kind of scared to do certain things. I've seen those scared habits affect how they use their voice. I've seen also just people being very soft-spoken. Hey, how are you doing? And they have very breathy voices, or they're not used to using their strong voice. Hey! And as a result, of all of these different sort of, I guess, programs that people have, that affect how they use their voice, that affects how they do these approaches. So that's why there's no one size fits all approach that works for everybody. For an average student, or I wouldn't say an average student, but for some students that I work with, I like regularly take them through 80 to 100 approaches really quickly to just figure out what works best for them. And that's how we see very quick results. It's not about hammering in an approach that doesn't work for you and expecting that, okay, if I just practice that more and more, eventually that will work. That is how you spend years not making progress. And I say that because that was what happened to me. It took me 4 to 5 years to learn how to get the screams that I wanted, just because I was practicing approaches that didn't work for me over and over and over again, hoping for different results. Okay, so if you want to find out more approaches, and if you want to fundamentally understand what makes these screams work more so that you get quicker progress, what I'm going to do is this. I'll leave a link underneath this video where if you click it, you'll get access to a in-depth anatomical training about how to do these screams, as well as multiple different approaches. And if you want to make really, really fast progress, it will also give you a link where you can apply to schedule a free screaming consultation with me. And on that call, then I'll take a listen to your screams, evaluate your goals, and we'll see honestly if it's a good fit for coaching. So if you want to make the quickest possible progress on your screams, click that link below this video and I'll see you inside. All right, peace.